Every story leaves something behind. A whisper, a shadow, a question that was never answered. Here, we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully, because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves. Tonight we have 4 true horror stories from people who met strangers on Tinder and realized too late that the person sitting across from them wasn't who they claimed to be. These are all allegedly true stories submitted by viewers. Settle in and maybe think twice before swiping right. This first story was sent to me by a listener named Sophie. She calls it the Second Toothbrush. It's one of those stories where the details start small, almost too small to notice, but once you put them together, you realize you were never alone. She had 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom. I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't asked to use it before we left for dinner. She said the second one was her roommate's, but the apartment was a studio. There was no roommate. I'd matched with Claire on Tinder about a week before this. She was 26, worked in graphic design, had the kind of profile that seemed almost too normal. No weird prompts, no red flags. We'd been texting casually, and she suggested I come pick her up at her place instead of meeting at the restaurant. I figured that was a good sign. Her apartment was on the 4th floor of one of those old brick buildings in the Arts District downtown. The hallway smelled like dried lavender, and her door had 3 locks on it, which I thought was just city living. Inside, the studio was small but tidy. White walls, a few plants, a neatly made bed in the corner. Everything felt curated, like a photo from a lifestyle blog. I asked to use the bathroom, and that's when I saw the 2 toothbrushes. One pink, one blue, both in the same cup. The blue one was wet. I came back out and mentioned it casually, and she laughed and said her roommate had just left. I looked around the studio again. There was one bed, one closet, one set of keys on the counter. We went to dinner. It was fine. She was pleasant, laughed at the right moments, asked me questions about my job, but something about her timing felt off, like she was performing a version of a date she'd rehearsed. Every response came half a second too fast, as if she already knew what I was going to say. When we got back to her building, she asked if I wanted to come up for a drink. I said sure. We walked up the 4 flights, and she unlocked all 3 locks. The apartment looked exactly the same, except for one thing. There was a glass of water on the nightstand that hadn't been there before. It was half empty. The condensation on the outside told me it hadn't been sitting there long. I asked her about it, trying to keep my voice light. She glanced at it and said she must have left it before we went out. But I'd been in the apartment for 20 minutes before dinner. I walked past that nightstand. It wasn't there. She poured me a drink in the kitchen, and I sat on her couch, trying to talk myself out of the feeling building in my chest. That's when I heard it, a faint sound from behind the closet door. Not a creak, not settling wood. It sounded like someone shifting their weight very carefully from one foot to the other. I looked at Claire. She was stirring her drink, watching me with a perfectly calm expression. She hadn't reacted to the sound at all. I told her I'd forgotten something in my car. She didn't try to stop me, didn't look disappointed. She just smiled and said okay. I didn't go to my car. I left the building. When I got to the sidewalk, I turned around and looked up at her window on the 4th floor. The light was on, and there were 2 silhouettes standing behind the curtain, both completely still, both watching me. That one gets under my skin because of how calm she was. Like this was routine, like she'd done this before, and the person in that closet had a role to play. Our next story is called The Restaurant That Closed Early. It was submitted by a woman named Dana, and what she found inside that restaurant still has no explanation. The hostess seated us at the only table with a candle, which would have been romantic if every other table in the restaurant hadn't been completely empty. I'd been on maybe 3 Tinder dates before this one, and they'd all been at busy bars or coffee shops. But Marcus had suggested this Italian place on the east side of town that I'd never heard of. He said the pasta was incredible. I looked it up and it had a Google listing but no reviews, which I thought was strange but not alarming. The restaurant was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a unit with papered-over windows. Inside, it looked legitimate enough. Checkered tablecloths, framed photos of the Italian countryside on the walls, the smell of garlic and olive oil. But there were no other diners. Not one. And it was a Saturday at 7:30. Marcus was already there when I arrived. He looked like his photos, which was a relief. Tall, dark hair, easy smile. He stood up when I walked in and pulled out my chair. Old-fashioned, but I didn't mind. The hostess brought us menus and disappeared into the back. The menu was short. 5 entrees, 3 appetizers, no prices. I asked Marcus about it and he said it was that kind of place. A hidden gem. Don't worry about the cost. Our waiter came over. An older man who never made eye contact with me. He spoke only to Marcus, like they knew each other. Marcus ordered for both of us, without asking what I wanted. I started to feel uncomfortable, but I told myself I was overthinking it. The food came fast, too fast. I'd barely taken a sip of my water, and 2 full plates of pasta were placed in front of us. The waiter filled Marcus's wine glass, and then walked away without offering me any. That's when I noticed the photos on the wall behind Marcus. I'd assumed they were generic Italian landscapes, but looking more closely, they were photographs of this restaurant. The same checkered tablecloths, the same candle arrangement, and in every photo, there was a woman sitting at this exact table. A different woman in each one. 6 photos, 6 different women, all sitting where I was sitting now. In every photo, the chair across from the woman, Marcus's chair, was empty. I excused myself to the bathroom. The hallway to the restrooms passed by the kitchen, and the door was propped open. I glanced inside. No one was cooking. The stove was off. The counters were clean and dry. The food had come from somewhere, but it hadn't been made here. Not tonight. I kept walking past the bathroom and found a back exit. I pushed it open and stepped into the parking lot behind the strip mall. My car was parked out front, but I didn't want to walk back through the restaurant. I circled around the building. When I reached the front, I looked through the restaurant window. Marcus was still sitting at the table, eating calmly, but now the hostess was sitting in my chair, across from him, and the waiter was standing behind her, holding a camera. I got in my car and left. The next morning, I went back to look at the Google listing. The restaurant's name was gone. The listing showed only a vacant unit between a nail salon and a papered-over storefront. I drove by a week later. The space was empty. No tables, no photos, no checkered tablecloths, just an empty room with scuff marks on the floor where furniture used to be. The photos on the wall, 6 women all at the same table. I don't want to think about what that camera was for, or why those women were being documented. This next story might be the one that keeps you up tonight. It's called The Profile That Updated While We Talked. A woman named Megan sent this to me, and what the police found in her ceiling changed the way I think about safety. His bio changed 3 times during our first conversation, and every update described what I was wearing. I matched with someone named Jake on a Tuesday night. His profile was minimal. 1 photo, no bio, age listed as 29. The photo showed a man in a gray hoodie standing in front of a brick wall. Something about the image felt slightly wrong, but I couldn't place it. I swiped right anyway because I was bored, and sometimes that's all it takes. He messaged me almost instantly. Normal stuff. Hey, how's your night going? I told him I was just hanging out at home. We talked for maybe 10 minutes about nothing in particular. Then I went back to look at his profile because I wanted to see his photo again. And there was a bio now where there hadn't been one before. It read, "She's on the couch in a blue hoodie." I was on my couch in a blue hoodie. I stared at it for a long time. I told myself it was a coincidence. I mean, a lot of people wear hoodies on their couch on a Tuesday night. I kept talking to him. He asked what I was drinking and I said tea. And I went to check his profile again 5 minutes later. The bio now read, "Blue hoodie, tea, left leg tucked under her." My left leg was tucked under me. I felt every nerve in my body activate at once, but I couldn't move. I looked at my windows. The blinds were down. All of them. I live on the 2nd floor of a duplex, and the only window that faces the street has wooden blinds that I keep closed at night. There was no way someone could see in. I got up and checked every window anyway. Locked, blinds closed, curtains drawn in the bedroom. I checked the front door and the back door. Both locked. I went to every room. Empty. I was alone. I went back to my phone. Jake had sent another message. "You seem nervous. Is everything okay?" I didn't respond. I went to his profile again. The bio had updated. She checked the windows. She checked the doors. She didn't check the ceiling. I live in a duplex. There's an attic access panel in the hallway between my bedroom and the bathroom. It's just a square in the ceiling that lifts out. I'd never opened it. I'd never even thought about it. I called my brother. He lives 10 minutes away. I told him to come over right now, and I didn't explain why. I sat in my kitchen with a knife and every light in the apartment on, watching the hallway. I didn't look at my phone again. My brother got there in 8 minutes. I told him everything. He didn't believe me at first, but he saw my face and got a flashlight. He pushed the attic panel up and pointed the light inside. He didn't find anyone, but he found a sleeping bag, a phone charger plugged into the attic outlet I didn't know existed, and a small hole drilled through the ceiling into my hallway. The hole was about the diameter of a pencil, just wide enough to look through. We called the police. They came and documented everything. They dusted for prints. They took the sleeping bag. The Tinder profile had been deleted by the time I thought to screenshot it. The officer told me the sleeping bag looked like it had been used regularly. Not for days, for weeks, maybe longer. They never found Jake. I don't know if that was his real name. I moved out the following weekend. Sometimes I think about the first thing that felt wrong about his profile photo. The man in the gray hoodie standing in front of a brick wall. I realized later what bothered me about it. The brick wall behind him was the outside of my building. That last detail, his profile photo, was taken outside her building. He was already there before they ever matched. This last story is the longest one tonight, and it's the hardest one to sit with. It was sent to me by a woman who asked to remain anonymous. She calls it the date who brought me home and what the police found inside that house. I'll let her tell you. The GPS said we were 20 minutes from the restaurant, but we'd been driving for over an hour and the road had no streetlights. I need to explain something first. I almost never let a Tinder date drive me somewhere. I have rules about that. I always take my own car. I always tell a friend where I'm going, and I always meet in public. But Ethan had been different. We talked for 3 weeks before meeting. He was a nurse at a hospital I could verify. He had mutual friends with people I knew. He felt safe in the way that made me break every rule I had. He picked me up at my apartment. His car was clean and smelled like pine. He said he knew a great seafood place about 20 minutes north. I said sure. We got on the highway, and I didn't think much about it at first. We were talking easily, laughing about something on the radio. Then I noticed we'd passed the last exit I recognized. I asked him how much farther, and he said about 10 more minutes. 10 minutes later, the highway turned into a 2-lane road. Then the 2-lane road turned into something narrower, lined with trees on both sides so thick they formed a wall. I looked at my phone. No signal. I asked him again. He said we were almost there. His tone hadn't changed. He was still smiling, still relaxed, but his hands on the steering wheel had shifted. Both gripped tight at 10 and 2, knuckles white. I told him I wanted to go back. I said it plainly, the way you do when you're trying not to sound afraid. He looked at me, and for the first time his expression was unreadable. He said we were closer to the restaurant than we were to the city. It would be faster to keep going. That sounded logical, but something about the way he said it felt practiced. The road ended at a gravel driveway. At the end of the driveway was a house, not a restaurant, a single-story house with a porch light on and curtains in the windows. It looked lived in. Ethan parked and turned off the engine. He said the restaurant was behind the house, a private dining thing. You had to walk through the property to get to it. I didn't move. I told him I wasn't getting out of the car. He went quiet. He sat there with his hands in his lap, staring at the house. Then he said, "She's expecting us." I asked him who. He said his mother. He said she always meets them first. The way he said the word them made something in my chest collapse. I reached for the door handle and it didn't open. I pulled it again. Nothing. He looked at me and said it was the child lock. He said it calmly, like he was explaining how the radio worked. Then the porch light turned off. The front door of the house opened and someone stepped out onto the porch. I couldn't see a face, just a figure standing in the dark, waiting, not moving toward us, just standing. Ethan said we should go inside. He said it the way you'd say, let's grab a table. Normal, gentle, patient, like we had all the time in the world. And this was just what happened next. I did the only thing I could think of. I climbed into the back seat and tried the rear door. It opened. The child lock was only on the front passenger side. I fell out onto the gravel and started running. I ran down the driveway, back to the road into the trees. I could hear his car door open behind me, but I didn't hear footsteps. He didn't chase me. He just called after me, and his voice was calm and confused, like I was being unreasonable. He said my name once. Then he said, "You'll come back. They always come back when they get cold." I walked for 2 hours through those woods in the dark. I followed the road by feel, keeping the gravel shoulder under my feet. When I finally got a phone signal, I called 911. The police found me sitting on the shoulder of a county road, 11 miles from the nearest town. I gave them the address. I described the house, the driveway, the trees. They drove out there that night. The house was real, but when they got there, no one was inside. The front door was unlocked, and the porch light was on again. The house had furniture, food in the fridge, and clothes in the closet. In the bedroom, they found a dresser with a drawer full of phones. 11 phones, all different models, all dead. On the wall above the dresser, there were nails, small finishing nails, hammered into the drywall in a row. 11 of them, like something had been hanging there and had been recently taken down. They never found Ethan. The hospital he claimed to work at had no record of him. The mutual friends I thought we shared said they'd never heard his name. His Tinder profile used photos pulled from a private Facebook account belonging to a man in another state who had no idea his pictures were being used. I still think about those 11 phones. I think about the nails on the wall and what used to hang from them. And I think about what he said when I ran. Not a threat, not anger, just calm certainty. They always come back when they get cold. If any of these stories resonated with you, if you've had an experience on a dating app that you can't explain, you can always send it to me. In the meantime, be careful out there and maybe drive yourself on the first date.
And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.